Okay, I guess this would be just religious histories and what's there and what's not there. There's nothing really miraculous about Christianity, the history of it, except two things. When I say miraculous, I mean anomalous or inexplicable. Basically inexplicable. You know, that we know happened, but why did it happen? It's kind of a freak thing. Um, and as I stated before, and as you can see in just the canon that we have now, there's 4 different gospels. I mean, this is something that took place in history. And one thing I want to add for this, it'll come into play later. Many scholars downplay the persecution between the crucifixion and Constantine, and they say it's not like it's said and this and that. That was appropriate to say about 40-50 years ago when people went to Sunday school and they learned about Christianity. Now churches, the vast majority of them, learn about Jesus and the apostles in a very screwed up Americanized way. They actually, most of American Protestantism despises anybody that came after the apostles. They don't like the church fathers. They definitely don't like Constantine. So they would want, oh, and the world welcomed in Christianity. They did, because it's wealth and health, prosperity, and you can have your nice car and your house and your big house, get a divorce and all this stuff and still go into heaven. Well, the scholars are used to kind of combating it's total persecution, the whole thing. Total persecution, yes. Being persecuted as a persecuted minority, yeah. Is it killing people constantly? No. There was about 12 distinct persecutions and about 4 big ones. Starting really marked at Nero of emperor sanctioned persecutions, and not just Jews killing them or local courts or anything like that. The apostles, they try to paint it to where they have it bad in their time, but it gets a hell of a lot worse for people afterwards. People reading Gospels during the time after Nero or under Vespasian or Trajan or would be like, you guys got off light. What are you talking about? Starting with Nero, going to Diocletian, Maximinus, and Licentius, and then stops after Constantine. You get a little bit of a resurge, kind of a bad attitude towards Christianity under Julian the Apostate. Funny enough, last of the Constantinian line. But Constantine just tolerates Christianity. That's all he does. He just tolerates it. And then slowly it moves over 60-year period to after Julian the Apostate. The empire is officially Christian. This is what we call Byzantine Empire, distinguished from ancient Roman Empire. Now, what are the 2 inexplicable things? One is why anybody would follow a crucified Messiah. That's the most that's the oddest thing. Why would Jews be following a crucified Messiah? There's no precedence for this before happening. I hope all of my viewers know that Jesus is Attis and Jesus is Mithras and Jesus and Horus and the Peter Joseph stuff from Zeitgeist. That the best job of debunking that is done by the atheists, and I give them a lot of credit, and I think I give them a lot of props, and I think they get a lot of credibility for that. Because if they're saying, you know what, this is great, but it's all bullshit, and we can't use this because if they, because somebody can easily come and debunk it, and then we're left looking like an ass. And good for them. They beat the Christians to the punch, or a lot of them did. Some of them kind of walked right into Zeitgeist and like, oh, this is gold. But one is a crucified Messiah. That's ridiculous. Even the Gospels, Peter's like, no, you're not. You're not going to get crucified. You're going to go on and call out the angels, and you're going to reign in the. You're going to expel the Romans, and we're going to have this paradise in Israel. So that's weird. The second thing is it's inexplicable how Christianity grew. There's no non-miraculous way of it growing, really, because by the time you have it become even tolerated, it's gigantic. And you already have other cults trying to copy off of Christianity, and by the time of Theodosius, where it becomes the official, it's like 75% of the empire. And even before that, Edessa was officially Christian. There were kingdoms outside the Roman Empire that were officially Christian. The Visigoths were Christian before the Romans. The Armenia, that was officially Christian before the Romans. Anomalous stuff with Islam. Well, all of canonized Orthodox Islam, if you want to call it that, of Sahih Bukhari and Sunan Abu Dawud, and Sahih Muslim, Ibn Kathir, Al-Tabari. Funny thing, Al-Tabari actually alludes to a lot of things. He's writing in the dark, but there's glimpses of things. We're told that in Mecca, where in the Quran all the flora and fauna is different, and the distances that it says that Mecca is from these different cities would have to place it above the Dead Sea. It would have to. Or maybe just below the Dead Sea is what you can get away with. But flora, fauna, people, cultures, distances to different cities. It takes 2 days to get to there. You see this every day. It takes 4 days to go to here. These people, these Meccans, or this prophet is writing as if he's in southern Palestine. It's pagan. You have the Christians in the north. You have Zoroastrians in the east. And you have this thriving pagan city where there's few Christians and Jews. But yet the guy keeps screaming at the Christians and Jews constantly, and doesn't. And then the Christians and Jews get called pagans, but it's pagan. Well, when you look at it, and this band of ragtag guys who are really zealous in their religion and prayer take the biggest landmass that's ever been in an empire, and it was miraculous because they defeated the Romans. We are dealing with the Middle Byzantine period, where the empire is very weak, and so is the Persian Empire. Two greatest empires of culture and everything. They had exacted decades-long war upon each other. And in 622, the start of the Islamic calendar, the Byzantines, after they basically get wiped out, come back with their forces and defeat the Persians. And it's called the New Era, or the Era of Peace, at 622. But guess what? Both armies are decimated. They have no guys left, so they win all this territory, and then they just have to retreat. Not really retreat, but they're stretched so thin they can't hold it. Well, what history usually doesn't tell you if you're just going in history class, unless you're really investigating it. So there's two states, the Lakhmids and the Ghassanids. Pretty much all of Iraq was either Christian or Jewish at this point. It was a buffer zone. The Ghassanids were a Monophysite group that was a buffer zone against the Persians. The Lakhmids, and I may be flipping these, Lakhmids were Nestorians. Now, they're called Nestorians and Monophysites, but of what particularly they believed, not quite sure. But they were heretical groups, heresies that couldn't survive in the empire because of the council. So they were getting expelled, but the Persians were using the Nestorians as basically these auxiliary shock troops to come in, the vanguard, to hold the front of the line. the Byzantines were using the Ghassanids. So their armies are still standing. They're both Arabs, groups of Arabs. They both speak Aramaic, which would become Arabic. And the Ghassanid icons, suspiciously, are identical to when we'd see icons of Muhammad or any Islamic reliefs. I mean, they're identical in some ways. I mean, in shocking ways, like that clearly says Christ in Greek on it across the guy's head. But, by, 300 years later, they weren't really reading Greek. So they still had these things, or, that's an obvious Christian sign from the 4th century. Oh, well, they didn't, maybe in the 10th century, the Muslims didn't know what that is. It's very strange. So they rise up, and they take Egypt without a fight, and they come into Palestine. And all the Jews that weren't welcome in the empire and that got expelled from Alexandria or this place or that place, or Edessa, that are mixing with the Arabs and telling these stories and the different forms of Christianity, when they conquer, we see what's on their coins: crosses and menorah and images of people. And they're acting and writing like iconoclastic Byzantines from that exact same period. Now, the Islamic sources don't say, oh yeah, they poured out of northern Arabia, southern Iraq, Jordan, Syria, kind of. We're listening to bishops, we're putting crosses on everything they took over, had crosses on their coins. Some areas they had menorahs, some areas they wrote in Latin. And it really, the beginning of the Islamic Empire, of Mohammedism, really wasn't Islam, because you could be any religion. There were Zoroastrians or this or that, but you had to be this weird type of Syriac Christian to be Khilafah or one of the deputies. That's what the historical record bears out for the first 150 years. But the history of Islam does not fit into the historical record. The whole thing is anomalous, is unexplainable. And it's unexplainable because we have evidence to the contrary. We don't have evidence to the contrary that the followers of Jesus believed in, a crucified Messiah. They obviously did. Why did they? We don't know. Why did Christianity erupt so? Why over 300 years did an oppressed minority rule empire? We don't know. But we know it happened. With Islamic history, we know it didn't happen. Now, I don't care about what events in the life of Christ happened, or, you have huge chunk of history missing. 150 years of just a cartoon written over. This is inexcusable. It just doesn't make sense. And even, it's like if you read the Gospels and it said, well, this took place in Ireland. Well, actually, the flora and the fauna, this took place in Ireland in the 11th century. You look at the Gospels, you go, the flora, the fauna, the way people are acting, the two civilizations that are interacting, and even the minority groups like the Syro-Phoenicians and the Samaritans, those are all in Palestine. We get the same thing with the Quran. It's earlier than it says it is, and it's happening in southern Palestine as well. So, it's very, very shocking. Maybe it's because I have a foot in both cultures, that I have ancestry from Muslims and Christians, but to me, it just blows my mind when I read this stuff.